Anytime Maritime.
Anytime Maritime. It's anytime Maritime.
Good morning. It's really great to be back, and thank you, Mike, for extending an invitation once again. I want to, first of all, express my gratitude to Ferry for giving me a chance to come back and speak with you in my new role. Also, of course, to all the sponsors, but especially to Grimaldi Group and my friend, Manuel Grimaldi. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for sponsoring this event as you have. And I'd also like to thank the people in the community of Sorrento. It's a little bit odd to me that in 8 years with MSC, I never made it to Sorrento, as big of a presence as they have here. But here I am, host of the Grimaldi Group and Ferry today, and I'm very glad to do that. I woke up this morning and saw the beautiful scenery outside of my balcony. I thought, I really understand why this place of the world is so popular. I've got to come back. So the theme of what I'm going to speak to you about today is connections and connectivity. And I think it's very fitting that we're here in the region of Campania as we stand here this morning, because I think it's a very good example of how interconnected we can all be. Because if you think about it, and if you look in the harbor, you'll see one of my memberships, Oceania Journey, is here today. They bring in international tourists to come into a region. And in this region in particular, you have a network of ferries which provides transport and connects the region. It makes that all within reach, particularly if there's an overnight for a cruise ship or even just a day trip. You can have a wonderful excursion because of this network of ferries that exists right here. And so I think from an operational standpoint, that sort of synergy is not only beneficial for our respective customers, whether it's the ferry customer base or the cruise customer base, not only just our businesses, which certainly benefit if our customers are happy, but also for the communities in which we serve. And I think this region is a very good example of that, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak about it here today. But also, if you think about connectivity in a broader sense, I gave a speech at IMO World Maritime Day parallel event many years ago in Istanbul on exactly this topic, and it was when I was at CLIA the first time. And if you look at history, those countries and those cultures and those peoples that are connected by commerce and connected by joint travel between them are far less likely to end up in physical conflict and war. It really is a process of integrating society can actually make a level of interdependence that frankly makes us all more inclined to get along even when we have differences. And if you look at what's going on in the world today, it's a very uneasy time, and I certainly would like to see more of that integration and interconnectivity occur throughout society, and hopefully your businesses and the business of our members at CLIA can be a big part of that going forward. So I think it is very important whether we're talking about moving people or whether we're talking about moving cargo. In the case of many of the people in this room, you move both. My former boss used to famously say, yes, but our yellow boxes don't talk back to us and they don't complain anywhere near as much as the passengers do in the cruise side of the business, but that comes with it, right? I mean, we're in the cruise industry, we're in the business of creating good experiences that people will remember for the rest of their lives. And when they choose a cruise, it's not just economics. They, number one, choose where is that cruise going to go? And that's where that interconnectivity between our two sectors can be very important. And then also, and I'll touch on this in a little more detail, the connectivity in our mutual interest in the policy space is really great. I mean, I think I could poll this room, and I doubt I'd see one hand go up as to who likes the CII. I think the ferry industry and the cruise industry were two really good examples of how flawed the fundamental assumptions were behind that particular regulatory instrument. I'm hoping that it takes a back seat now as we move forward into a genuine energy transition in our sector. But we had common interests there. We have common interests in fire safety. We have common interests in damage stability, which we worked on together for quite a few years. All of those things kind of add up to the responsibility of, thousands and thousands of people entrusting their lives to us day to day, and we have to live up to that. So in this region alone, and the previous speaker from the port highlighted it, Naples is extremely popular as a cruise destination, but I've rarely seen so much growth so quickly as we're seeing here, and that is 1.7 million passengers we had moved through Naples in 2024, and in 2025 we expect to see 2.2 million. That's really big growth, and if you look at it projected out worldwide, for context, we carried 34.6 million guests in 2024 and expect to carry 37.7 million in 2025. So you can see that is, relatively speaking, a very large increase, and it speaks to the popularity of the region and also, how much can be seen from a call here for the reasons that I mentioned a moment ago. And that compares, relatively speaking, to our numbers are a little less than 1 million ferry passengers per year in the region as well. So it's all very substantial, and it speaks to the deep maritime heritage of this region. So let's talk about safety a bit and resilience. We don't get any extra credit for being safe. Frankly, everybody expects that. My point of view, they're entitled to expect that. I think it's fundamental to being in the business of carrying passengers by any conveyance, whether you're an airline or a train company or you're a ferry or a cruise line. The passenger deserves to expect they're going to be safe and they're going to be taken care of in that regard. So we have this big burden and we have to spend a lot of money to deliver on it, but don't expect any extra credit or pats on the back for it, because frankly that's probably not going to happen. And I know in our business, we're a little cautious about talking too much publicly about all these great things we're doing for safety behind the scenes, because it reminds people of risks that we think we've got managed that we'd rather than not think about, and they think about their holiday instead because we're doing our part of the job. And I think a couple of great examples of that can be found in our respective organizations. I think the Ferry Safe project was outstanding, and I think it's a great example of collaboration in this sector. And as I think about my responsibility I have 46 cruise line members and then others in the community beyond the cruise line members, but they're all pretty much in the same business, and that is, ocean-going ships that are delivering people to have a great vacation experience. Your sector is so much more diverse. I sometimes don't know how you manage to do it all, because you do have such a wide range of operating profiles and business models in your industry. It makes it a challenge. And so you come together around that project, I thought was excellent. And on our side, we have a compendium of member policies, a couple of dozen policies that are mandatory conditions of membership of CLIA. And those go above and beyond the regulations. And some address fire safety, some address life-saving equipment, some address actually onboard experience like health, and even we have one on gaming as well, which some of you may have some experience with that. That information is all publicly available, by the way, so if you want to see what we're doing, we're transparent about it. But to be a member of CLIA, you have to not only implement those policies, but you have to have it part of your safety management system where the policies are appropriate, and then they have to be auditable, and your class society or your recognized organization that's providing the company level audit has to certify that, yes, indeed, those policies that are supposed to be integrated in the SMS are and have been subjected to potential auditing. So we think that was a good breakthrough for us. But again, hats off on the Ferry Safe project. I think it was excellent. We've had other projects we've worked on together related to fire and damage stability and other safety equipment and things like that I mentioned, and I think that'll continue. And Johan does outstanding work on your behalf at IMO. I know he and I have worked together for many, many years there, back when I was taller and had more hair, which Johan might remember, but I'm not so sure he'll admit it. But he really does do great work there, and my team works with him very closely. And I would love for us to do more of that. I think there's a lot more potential. And as I stepped into this role, one of the things that I thought I could do effectively, because of my experience in other sectors, including ferries, was that we could become a more meaningful contributor throughout the maritime community. And whether that was collaboration with Interferry, or I'm going to assign an MOU with International Association of Ports and Harbors in 2 days in Kobe, Japan as well, or whether it's working with ICS or BIMCO, I think that potential is really there, because whether we're talking about the energy transition or safety, collaboration is so important. So not only am I trying to unify our organization, which grew by some acquisition over time, and there's still a little bit of work to be done so that we look and feel and act like one single global organization of 105 people instead of a few different ones brought together, but also how we integrate into the broader community. And that's why opportunities like this, I'm really grateful for, because it's a big part fundamentally of what I want to do. It was mentioned a moment ago about digital links and cybersecurity. I want to pick up on that if I could. Those of you who have not been subject to attempts at a data breach probably just didn't realize it, because those attempts happen all the time. And if your defenses are safe enough, you know, most of them are unsuccessful. It just takes that one to slip past the goalie, and I can tell you it is really, really difficult to deal with. Unfortunately, I've had some experience with that. I've worked with competitors that had worse experiences. You cannot possibly be prepared enough. And the U.S. government in particular is pushing that very hard right now, and I would anticipate they will look for this very extensively in port state control to make sure these threats are being addressed, because they have a national interest, as I think all governments do, to keep commerce flowing, keep ships moving, keep people moving, and to do so safely. Because it's not just a malicious attack that we have to be worried about, which in the instances I was involved with were, malware, and they were specifically trying to, gain a commercial benefit out of their illegal activity. But we've become so reliant on equipment. I mean, think about where we are with charting these days, and think about where we are with other navigation equipment and with engine automation. All it takes is a failure in one of those systems that we've relied on that is a digitalized system. And if you don't have proper training in place and preparation of your crew for what they might face and how to recognize it, first of all, but then recover from it, it doesn't matter whether it was a malicious actor or just a resistor that blew out. These are some serious problems we really have to be on top of every single day, or else we could see all sorts of failures that could have very bad results environmentally and, most importantly, for safety. So I think that's very important. But in our business, as we look at the new shiny bright new object of what this electronic feature or that electronic feature can do, or artificial intelligence to do A, B, C, or D, it's important that we continue to use it for our fundamental purpose of providing that guest experience, and do so in a safe and environmentally sound way. And I would encourage you all to think about it in that context too. And don't apply technology just for the sake of applying technology. Apply it because it's solving an actual business need that you're looking for a solution for. The vendors are really, really good at highlighting the new things they're bringing to the marketplace, but sometimes there's a temptation to jump into a new technology without actually having prepped the battlefield with your own procedures and your own training and your own staffing levels to make that work effectively. Also on connection, I want to talk about the energy transition and particularly shore power at the moment. Both cruise and ferries have been leaders in shore power. I think had there not been uptake in our two sectors, I don't think we'd see much shore power at all anywhere else. And we don't have very much of it at the moment. And of what's there, a lot of it comes from suspect power production sources in the first place. If you think about it, it needs to meet the proper technical standard, and some people don't realize it, but there are international standards on this. There's an IEEE IEC standard, which is quite good. And then it also has to be marketable. Does it have to be less than producing energy on board? I don't think so, but it needs to be at a reasonable price where it's not cost prohibitive, as we've seen in some places, sometimes through ill-advised taxation. I mean, if you want to encourage something, you don't overtax it. If you want to encourage something, it makes more sense to reduce the tax burden that comes from it. But then the third thing, and this is extremely important, is the ultimate power production source where that electron is coming from had better be more environmentally sound than what we would have done ourselves on the ships, or else the whole thing really doesn't make much sense. And sometimes that part's lost out of the equation. So for our part, We have about 60% of the fleet of our members, which is about 166 ships, is that 60%. We're about a little over 300 total modern ocean-going cruise ships. It depends on how you add them up, but you get a number of something like 300 to 400. But the large ones are by and large, the majority are already equipped. And we expect by 2036 to have 273 ships. So the shipboard part's not that hard. The shoreside part, real hard, because still today it's less than 3% of the ports that cruise ships call on, which is about 41 out of like 1,500 that can provide shore power for one cruise ship. Think about that. So for all the talk you hear about shore power, and, well, you just need to plug in and use shore power, the shoreside infrastructure is just still woefully inadequate for that, in my opinion. So in the meantime, the energy transition continues. I think it kind of boils down to three issues here at this point that have to be solved: the fuels, and the fuels. Because I think the technology vendors are really making great progress. They're working with us. They're serving our needs. Methane slip is being greatly mitigated for those that choose methane. Methanol-ready engines are coming into the marketplace. Ammonia-ready engines not far behind at scale. All sorts of options are going to be available depending on which fuel track you choose. But will we have the molecules? I don't know. I mean, we've just seen the shutdown of a major production facility for aviation in Northern Europe to produce advanced fuels. I hope that's not a sign of what's to come for us, because we need our share of the molecules. And one thing I found at ICS in Hong Kong in a few weeks, I'm going to attend another session for this, is we started approaching energy ministers rather than just, when we think of the government as shipping enterprises, the natural insert point for us is the transport ministers. Well, if you think about it, the transport ministries aren't going to really define what I just said 3 times was the number one problem that has to be solved here. The energy ministers, on the other hand, do get that, and the energy ministers do have that potential, and the energy ministers are listening when ship owners say, look, IRENA says you have to move over 50% of these zero or net zero or near zero fuels by sea. We'll do it. We just need to know, where the major points of production or major points of consumption are going to be there. We'll help you solve your problem. That's a good message to start with when you're talking energy ministers. And you say, oh, by the way, that 4% or so of energy consumption that we account for, we need to make up for that too. Could we get a little bit of that? And they're, oh yeah, sure. So, there's real potential here for the shipping industry at large. And I would urge even those of us that aren't going to carry those molecules for, commerce, really take advantage of that line of discussion, because I think it's really important. We have large number of ships coming with multi-fuel engines. In 2018, we had one in our fleet, our members' fleet. We don't own any ships at CLIA, obviously. 2025 today, it's 25 ships. So that's a significant increase, especially because a modern cruise ship is about $1 billion to build, but it could be much more. It could be almost $2 billion, depending on what it is you're actually trying to accomplish. By 2036, we expect 50 plus. So the overwhelming majority of ships that are being delivered can use multiple fuels, especially those that aren't just drop-ins to substitute for conventional fossil liquid fuels, but those that are really in the methane track, bio to synthetic, methanol track, which you really have to get to bio or synthetic for that to get any benefit today. And then for those that might find it appropriate, ammonia or hydrogen. We find some challenges with those at scale. In cruise, you'll probably face some of those as well, but there's no doubt they have a role to play in the energy transition. So we need regulations that are fit for purpose, that takes industry input into account, because otherwise we can't invest in it. We don't really know what to do for the future. Our members are investing tens of billions of euro right now in ships to run on fuels that don't exist in the marketplace. I mean, that takes a certain amount of courage and commitment that's not common in today's society, particularly if you're relying on the investment community to come in behind you and support that. But I think it's also a sign of great optimism in the passenger carrying business as well, including cruise and ferry. So I'm optimistic, but guardedly so, that IMO will come out with a fit-for-purpose, practical set of regulations as we move into the extraordinary session here coming up the week after next. I'll be I'm going there too. Johan, I'll see you there, briefly anyway. But there's a lot of challenges, including the United States doesn't want this to happen at all. I mean, they've been very clear that they plan to take retribution against governments that support this initiative that the industry's asked for years. So it's a very strange situation we find ourselves in, and I don't think anybody can yet predict what the threat of what are typically trade balancing sanctions being used to drive a policy outcome will have on government's willingness to adopt this regulatory regime that's needed to support the energy transition. We put out an annual report at CLIA on energy technology and practices. We've just recently released it. It'll speak for itself if you want to check it out on our website. But a couple high points there. We have 82% of cruise ships are running with advanced wastewater treatment systems, with a third of those meeting the higher Baltic standard as well. So that technology is being readily deployed. 98% of our ships produce their own fresh water, which takes burdens off the local community. And then we also have 81 ships now with SCR. If you choose an LNG route, you can get to Tier 3 LNG without SCR. But it's still a significant number, which is a tenfold increase since 2018. So I mentioned before, the main thing we really do is connect people and communities for the purpose of them having a great holiday experience that they'll take those memories away and live with them forever in a positive sense. That's what we're trying to accomplish. But, that's our guests, and they're the ones getting the experience that we're providing it for. But also, it's important that we connect with the crews and the crew members that come from states where they have very few livelihood opportunities. We're providing them great opportunity, as you are in your business, to have a meaningful career that has a logical progression to it, and they can support their families at home in ways they don't have the opportunity to do so otherwise. I mean, I'm not going to kid you and say that there isn't some advantage commercially as there is in shipping from drawing from the same talent pool, but it really does make a difference in the lives that we can touch through our crew members. And we do try to think of them as family members and hold them close, because without a happy crew, this whole thing for us just doesn't work, because all it takes is one grumpy experience for the guest and a crew member, and their vacation's going to have a very different spin on it when they tell people about it later. So it's really a critical part, and we're competing for very scarce human resources like the rest of the industry is. But then lastly, and maybe more importantly, is the communities that we serve need to share in that prosperity and be connected. And I think that's very similar for all of you as well, even though you're in a slightly different business, some of you are, and some from each other. The one thing that is common is communities. And so I have a couple of things that I'd like to point to for future collaboration. Even though we're not exactly aligned, as you can tell from my comments, I think we have a lot of synergy and a lot of similarities. And that is, I think that it's really important that we look at governance and how the regulatory regimes are put together and work on that together wherever we have those synergies, and cooperate with other associations to build coalitions to drive good outcomes. Not good outcomes mean we don't get regulated, but good outcomes meaning if something has a legitimate policy basis behind it, help it get there in a way that actually functions and works properly and doesn't just create chaos and uncertainty. Second is operations, that I think that as we look at sharing best practices in the area of safety and environmental protection, and I think there's just a huge amount of value to be gained there by us working together, because we're operating in a lot of the same communities, Naples and the Campania region being a great example. I also think with energy, when you're talking about shoreside power supply and also facilitating the energy transition, there's a huge amount of similarity and work that we can do together. And we face a lot of the same challenges, and some of those challenges are different than the mass of the 60,000 ships that are out there operating commercially, carrying cargo. And then lastly, the fourth area is communities. I think where we are involved in a particular community and we're doing so together, I think we can set the example. We can be leaders, and we can be very responsible stewards, responsible tenants, responsible customers of the ports and communities that we serve and we're bringing our guests to, and you're moving both cargoes and passengers in and out of. And I think there's a lot of room to work together there by taking those complaints seriously when they arise and those interests, and working collaboratively to find good solutions, and then actually following through and doing everything we said we were going to do. So I do think that we're all in the business of providing solutions. I say to shipping audiences all the time, our business is problem solving, and if you don't like challenges and problems to solve, you probably picked the wrong line of work. So if you're having a rough day because things are challenging, that's normal. We're supposed to be working through those things. That's what we get paid for. And most important, this connection between the sea and people is something we both facilitate as industries, and I think there's a huge amount of work that we can do together, keeping that principle in mind. I thank you once again for the opportunity to speak today. It's really been my pleasure to join Interferry once again. Thank you, Mike.
We get this mic on. I hope you have time for a few questions before you head out the door.
I have as much time as you want, although I find that now that I'm in a CEO job, a lot more people want to tell me what I'm supposed to say.
Exactly, yeah. I think I'm
So you get what you get.
We have just a reminder in the session that we're on the app. If you look up in the top right corner and hit the Q&A, there's questions there, and we actually have them up on the board now. I think we got time for a couple. I was looking through them earlier, and there's a couple here that are kind of bunched together that I think would put them up the top of the list. So when we think about ferries, we always talk about providing lifeline service. It's a necessity. People have to go from A to B, get to work, whatever. One of the things that we're seeing across the world now, and I know you guys are experiencing, is the anti-tourism movement, and especially as the cruise ships get bigger. So maybe some words on that and your perspective and how the cruise industry is dealing with that, because it seems to be getting to be a bigger issue.
It is becoming a bigger issue, and not just because of ferries and cruise ships. And if you pay attention to what was going on in June when there were some mass protests in Southern Europe, the main angst that was being expressed was actually people being forced out of their own homes because Airbnb was crowding them out. Now, does that mean we don't have a lot of work to do? Absolutely not. We have a lot of work to do. And I think that we can, both when it comes to ferries and cruise ships, I think that we can do a lot of things to try and disperse the guests or passenger flows in a way that, frankly, other transport modes can't do. I mean, tourism that's provided by sea can be managed in a way others can't. I think that's a key thing we need to remember, and that could be staggering calls, it could be staggering disembarkations, it could be diversifying shoreside experiences. All of those things were put into place in Dubrovnik successfully, and I think that's been a model for us as we look for solutions in other areas. But this problem's not going away, and it's one where I think community engagement, starting with recognition that those voices deserve to be heard and they deserve to be taken seriously, offers great opportunity, not just challenge.
Maybe a related question. We're seeing some massive cruise ships being built now. Mm-hmm. Any idea, any thoughts in terms of how big you think they might get before they can't build them any bigger?
So technically you can build probably a much bigger ship than the ones that are being delivered now. Might take some modification and be a limited number of yards. But first of all, inherent in your question, I think, is a belief that all the ships coming out, or the majority of ships coming out, are all really big, and they're not. The current dispersion of the fleet is about a third small, third medium, third large, and we put those breakpoints at 1,000 passengers, 3,000 passengers, and above. The order book looks about the same, but those large ships can only go so many places, and where they go, their footprint is so large, it makes everything I just said a moment ago even more important, and we own that. But don't be under the impression that we're seeing exponential increases in the size of the ships, because we're not, because the dispersion is, like I said, about a third, but also the difference between Oasis of the Seas in, 2009, about 225,000 gross tonnage, and the biggest ships today being about 245 or 250,000. It's not an exponential curve.
Okay. Where I live in British Columbia, many of the cruise, even though Vancouver is a huge port for cruise traffic, the bigger ships can't get underneath the Lions Gate Bridge anymore.
You've got an air gap problem there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and then the others have a Victoria problem.
So we could talk all day about some of this stuff, but maybe just your thoughts on what's going to happen at IMO in 2 weeks. You talked about it briefly, and of course the trump card is Mr. Trump, it seems to be, or the unknown. So what's your thoughts on that in terms of the vote that's needed for it to be passed?
So we believe that the current proposal would benefit from some urgent attention to the life cycle analysis in particular, and how those funds are going to be managed and spent that are generated. It's not my number, but the Union of Greek Ship Owners predicts it could be $100 billion a year in revenue by 2035. Let's say that's twice as much. 50 billion is a lot. Yeah. IMO's budget's not that much bigger than CLIA's year on year. We're talking about a lot of money. Those are huge questions yet to be answered. I would find it difficult as a national delegation to know exactly what I'm signing up for, particularly where the curves for the two tiers of what the credits are going to be set at is dependent on a life cycle analysis that isn't complete yet. So not only is it hard for governments, but I think it's very hard for us as ship owners and those that represent them to make good investment decisions on that. So I would like to see some urgent attention put into that, but I also want IMO to be successful first and foremost here, because I think if they are not, the consequence is actually very high. And that is in the face of extraordinary political pressure beyond anything IMO has seen before. And like I said, it's you're asking me to predict something that's almost unpredictable, but it is not charted territory that they're in at the moment, and I don't think governments have played their cards yet. But I could say if the EU were willing to signal they could be a little bit more patient, then I think we might end up with a better product with a little bit more work put into it.
Yes, and we totally agree with that in terms of, from an EU standpoint, what we think we need out of the EU. So a couple of things that we can't get to here. We're going to talk about electrification in a few minutes with Isabel, and onshore power. In terms of the IMO conversation, greenhouse gases, that's going to be the focus of Johan's presentation later this morning. So, but Bud, I know you made a lot of special arrangements to get here to speak with us today, because as you said earlier, you're going to International Association of Ports and Harbors conference in Japan, right?
I am, yeah.
Where you're going to sign that agreement. So thank you for being here. Absolutely appreciate it. And we want to continue to work closer with the cruise line industry going forward. So thank you.
Mike, thank you. It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you all.
Anytime, maritime.
Anytime Maritime.
Anytime maritime. Anytime maritime. It's anytime maritime.
Anytime, maritime. Anytime, maritime.